Seoul wasn't just a city tonight. It was a liquid prison. The rain hammered the Gangnam pavements with a relentless metallic rhythm, turning the dazzling neon signs into bleeding smears of color. For Chioma and Min-jun, each drop felt like a nail sealing her coffin. 5 months. 5 months of living in the shadows, jumping at every glance. Her heart a frantic bird trapped in the cage of her ribs. The life growing inside her, the secret she'd fled Lagos to protect, kicked, a sharp reminder of why she couldn't afford to be afraid. She pulled the collar of her thin, second-hand coat tighter, the Korean winter biting through the wool. She'd just finished her shift at the 24-hour Jajangmyeon restaurant, the scent of fried black bean sauce clinging to her clothes, a cheap perfume of survival. All she wanted was the damp sanctuary of her tiny Goshawan room. She ducked into the narrow alley shortcut, a path she'd memorized, a ghost in the city's machinery. That's when she felt it. A shift in the atmosphere, a chilling stillness that had nothing to do with the weather. The hair on her nape rose. She glanced back. And the world stopped. At the mouth of the alley, backlit by the pulsing neon of a luxury department store, stood a figure she knew in her bones. Park Min-jun. His tailored black wool coat was beaded with rain. His hands buried in its pockets. He wasn't moving. He was just watching. Like a panther who had finally cornered its exhausted prey. 2 immense silhouettes flanked him, unmoving as gargoyles. The rain seemed to part around him, repelled by the sheer force of his presence. Chioma's breath hitched, a sharp pain shooting through her chest. "Oh, it's not possible. I was so careful." Her feet, rooted in terror, finally unlocked. She turned to run, a sob clawing its way up her throat. But the alley's other end was now blocked by another dark-suited figure. Crap. She pressed herself against the cold, wet brick wall, her hand flying to the pronounced curve of her stomach in an instinctive, protective gesture. Min-jun's eyes, black and fathomless, tracked the movement. A ripple of something unreadable, fury, shock, betrayal, crossed his impassive face. He began to walk towards her, his Italian leather shoes making no sound on the wet concrete. Each step was a measured, terrifying promise. He stopped so close she could smell the familiar scent of him. Cedar, iron, and a faint, expensive spice. It was the scent of her old life, of gilded halls and silent despair. Rain dripped from the sharp line of his jaw. His gaze was a physical weight, traveling from her terrified eyes to her rounded belly and back. When he spoke, his voice was softer than the rain, yet it cut deeper than any blade. "You took more than your freedom when you ran, Chioma." He leaned in, his lips almost brushing her ear. His next words were a whisper that froze her blood. "You took what is mine." Who is this woman, whose eyes hold both fierce defiance and bone-deep terror? What could drive a pregnant woman to flee across continents? And who is the formidable man she clearly believes owns her? What is the true story of their marriage? And whose child does she carry? For a long, suspended moment, they remained locked in that tableau, the hunted and the hunter in the pouring Seoul rain. Min-jun's control was absolute, a terrifying contrast to the tempest she saw swirling in the depths of his eyes. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. His will was an invisible chain. One of his guards took a step forward, but Min-jun lifted a single finger. The man froze instantly. This was between them. Personal reckoning. "You have 10 seconds, Min-jun stated. His voice now devoid of even the cold whisper, flat and final. "To walk to the car on your own." He paused, letting the unspoken alternative hang in the air, more threatening than the downpour. "Or I carry you. The choice, as ever, is yours, Jagiya." The Korean endearment, once maybe spoken with a hint of warmth, now felt like the most brutal of curses. It was a reminder of the vows she'd broken, the role she'd abandoned. Chioma's mind screamed at her to fight, to scream, to dissolve into the rain. But she thought of the baby. She thought of the clinical efficiency of his men. Exhaustion, deeper than bone, settled over her. The fight that had sustained her for months bled out, leaving only a hollow, cold acceptance. Her shoulders slumped. The defiance in her eyes guttered, replaced by a weary surrender. Without a word, she took one shaky step away from the wall. Then another. She walked past him, feeling his burning gaze on her profile, and moved towards the sleek black sedan idling at the curb, its open door a gaping maw. As she slid into the leather interior, the scent of him engulfing her, he followed, settling beside her. The door thudded shut, sealing them in a silent, pressurized capsule. The driver pulled away, the city lights streaking past the rain-streaked window. Min-jun finally turned his head to look at her, his expression carved from granite. He let his gaze rest heavily on her belly, now impossible to hide in the close confines. "You will explain this," he stated, his voice low and dangerous. "And then, my runaway bride, you will learn the true price of betraying a dragon." The car surged forward, carrying her not just through the streets of Seoul, but back into the very heart of the gilded nightmare she had risked everything to escape. The car didn't head towards the dizzying heights of the Gangnam penthouse, that sterile monument to their arranged marriage, all cold marble and abstract art that held no warmth. Instead, it climbed into the shrouded, pine-scented hills north of the city. After passing through massive silent gates, it revealed a breathtaking contradiction. A sprawling, traditional Hanok estate, its graceful curved roofs and wooden beams glowing softly against the dark sky. It was a postcard of serene Korean heritage. To Chioma, its high walls and secluded silence screamed one thing only: a fortress. He led her wordlessly across a manicured courtyard, the raindrops now plinking softly into a central stone basin. The Hanok was a maze of quiet elegance. He stopped at a sliding door faced with delicate hanji paper. With a subtle motion, he disengaged a hidden digital lock, a stark, modern intrusion on the traditional facade. The room inside was beautiful: warm ondal floors, a low lacquered table, and a breathtaking view of a secluded rock garden. It was also unmistakably a cell. "You will stay here," Min-jun declared, his voice echoing in the quiet space. He shrugged off his soaked overcoat, revealing a tailored suit that clung to his broad shoulders. "The doctor will come in the morning." Panic, sharp and fresh, lanced through Chioma's fatigue. To do what? The question tore from her, laced with dread. He turned fully to face her, and for the first time, she saw the mask slip completely. The controlled fury from the alley was gone, replaced by something raw, volcanic, and terrifying. It was the rage of a king who found his throne empty, his scepter stolen. "To confirm," he bit out, each word sharp and deliberate, "what you so cleverly hid from me. To verify the existence of my heir." The possessiveness in his tone, the reduction of her child to a dynastic asset, ignited a spark of her old fire. "It's my child," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. His laugh was a short, harsh sound with no humor. "You conceived it in my bed, under my name. Everything that is yours," he said, taking a step closer, his height dominating her, "has always been mine. You simply forgot. The doctor will help you remember." He moved to the door, then paused, his back a rigid line. Without looking back, he added, "Sleep well, wife. Tomorrow we settle accounts." The door slid shut with a whisper of wood on wood, followed by the definitive soft snick of the electronic lock. Alone, Chioma's legs gave way. She sank to the warm floor, her hands splayed over her belly. "I'm so sorry, little one," she choked into the silent, beautiful room. I tried so hard." The Hanok, for all its beauty, felt like the most exquisite coffin she could imagine. As the first light of dawn tinged the paper doors gray, a soft knock announced not the doctor, but a maid with a breakfast tray. Behind her, standing in the hallway with an air of impenetrable authority, was an elderly man Chioma had seen only in a single formal wedding photo: Min-jun's father. His cold eyes swept over her and the room, lingering on her stomach with unmistakable disdain. The real battle, it seemed, was beginning before she'd even had a chance to stand. The doctor's visit was a silent, clinical affair. A kind-eyed older woman who spoke gently but offered no comfort beyond professional courtesy. The confirmation was swift. A healthy, approximately 5-month pregnancy. The report was delivered to Min-jun in his study, a room that felt like a command center. All dark wood, a massive desk, and a wall of screens displaying silent financial tickers and security feeds. Chioma was summoned there. Min-jun stood by the window, the morning light doing nothing to soften the angles of his face. He dismissed the doctor with a nod. "You knew," he stated, the accusation hanging in the air like smoke. "Before you took a single step out of that penthouse, you knew you carried my child. That's why you ran. Not for freedom. To steal." The injustice of it, the sheer arrogance, broke the dam inside Chioma. The fear was burned away by a torrent of pent-up anguish. "I ran to save my child." Her voice, rich with Nigerian cadence, filled the sterile room. From a life as a trophy in a gilded cage. From a father whose heart is a frozen vault and whose legacy is written in other people's blood and tears. She was shouting now, tears of fury streaming down her cheeks. "I want my baby to know laughter that isn't a performance. To know love that isn't a transaction. Not this cold, calculated empire." Min-jun turned from the window, his expression dangerously calm. He walked to his desk and placed his palms flat on the dark wood, leaning forward. "You think a life of hiding, of scraping by in dirty alleyways, is a nobler legacy than the Park Empire? Than wealth, power, and a name that commands respect across continents?" "Yes," she fired back, unwavering. 1,000 times yes. Poverty of the body is nothing compared to poverty of the soul. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He pushed off the desk and straightened, his decision made. "Then let me clarify your options, Chioma. They are simple and they are final." He held up one finger. "Choice 1, you remain here. As my wife. In name and in fact. You will give me my heir. You will fulfill your public duties flawlessly. In return, the child will want for nothing. The best education, the best protection, a future emperors would envy. Furthermore," he added, his eyes locking onto hers, "your father's failing import business in Lagos will not only be spared from collapse, but it will flourish under my generous and distant patronage. Your family will live in comfort under my protection." Chioma's blood ran cold. He wasn't just threatening her. He was holding a sword over everyone she loved. "And the second choice?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He held up a second finger, his gaze turning to ice. "Choice 2, you exercise your freedom. You try to run again. You can try right now. But if you take one step outside my protection with my child, I will not chase you." He paused, letting the false promise of mercy hang for a cruel second. "Instead, I will pick up the phone. I will call in every debt your father has ever nervously shaken my hand over. I will have my lawyers bury his company under a mountain of litigation so high he will never see the sun again. You can have your back alley freedom, Chioma. And in exchange, your family will have a life of utter, irrevocable ruin. The choice," he finished, spreading his hands, "as it has always been, is yours." He waited, a king pronouncing judgment. Chioma stood paralyzed, the weight of his ultimatum crushing her. To save her child's future, she had to condemn it to the very world she feared. To save her family, she had to surrender herself completely. As she opened her mouth, no sound came out. Seeing her hesitation, Min-jun's eyes narrowed. "Think carefully," he murmured. "But not for too long. My patience, unlike my resources, is not infinite." He turned to a screen, dismissing her. "You may go. Send your answer with the maid at dinner." Days bled into a week of tense, silent coexistence. Chioma was a prisoner, but a curiously well-treated one. Meals were exquisite, her comfort attended to. Yet, the lock on the door and the ever-present silent guard at the end of the hallway were constant reminders. Her spirit, however, was not so easily caged. She began, subtly at first, to imprint herself on the environment. She asked the maid for a radio and tuned it to a station that played Afrobeats. The vibrant, percussive rhythms of Burna Boy and Wizkid felt like a rebellion in the serene Hannock. She started humming old Nigerian hymns her mother sang, songs of faith and resilience, while sitting in the inner courtyard garden. One afternoon, overwhelmed by a craving, she requested plantain and pepper soup from the chef. The man had looked utterly baffled. To her shock, the next day, the ingredients were procured, and a tentative, if not entirely authentic, version appeared at her meal. She said nothing, but she saw the order had come from the top. The crack appeared on a cold evening. She'd been exploring a small, curated library in a side wing, filled with Korean classics and dry business texts. She found a single well-worn book of poetry, Kim Seol's Azaleas. Curling up by the low-burning fire in the hearth, she tried to lose herself in the melancholy verses. Exhaustion from the emotional turmoil claimed her, and she drifted to sleep, the book falling open on her lap. She awoke to a strange sensation, a warmth, a weight on her shoulders. Blinking, she found a heavy cashmere blanket draped over her. And there, standing a few feet away, his profile etched in firelight, was Min-jun. He was staring into the flames, a crystal glass of amber liquor in his hand, his expression unguarded. In that moment he looked weary. Not a dragon, but a man carrying a mountain on his back. The harsh lines of his face were softened, and she saw the ghost of the man she'd sometimes glimpsed before their wedding, the one who'd asked with genuine curiosity about the markets of Lagos, about her studies in architecture. Her slight stir caught his attention. His head turned, and their eyes met in the flickering light. For a heartbeat there was no anger, no calculation, just a strange, shared stillness. Then, as if a switch was flipped, his mask slammed back into place. He straightened, his gaze turning cool. "Don't mistake a moment of necessity for care, Chioma," he said, his voice rough. "A cold wife is of no use to anyone, least of all to carrying a healthy heir." He turned to leave. But the seed had been planted. In her heart, and though he'd never admit it, in his. The next morning, a large, flat box wrapped in simple paper was delivered to her room. Inside, carefully folded, was a stunning hanbok in the deepest, most vibrant shade of indigo, embroidered with subtle silver cranes. It was not the style of a young girl, but of a respected matron. There was no note. But the message was clear. He was making a space for her on his terms. As she ran her fingers over the exquisite silk, the maid bowed and said, "Master Park requests you wear it this evening. There is a guest for dinner." The guest was Elder Park. Min-jun's father sat at the head of the low dining table like a stone idol, his presence sucking the warmth from the room. Chioma entered in the indigo hanbok, feeling both regal and like an impostor. Min-jun, already seated, watched her enter. His eyes flickered over the dress, a barely perceptible nod of approval the only sign he gave. The meal was a silent, agonizing affair. Elder Park's disdain was a physical force. He spoke only in rapid, dismissive Korean to his son, ignoring Chioma completely. He spoke of business, of weaknesses in their holdings, of the need for pure, strong alliances. Then, as a servant refilled his bowl, he finally let his cold gaze rest on Chioma's midsection. In Korean he said to Min-jun, voice dripping with contempt, "A half-breed heir. A dilution of our bloodline. I told you taking a foreign bride, an African bride, was a sentimental error. She is a complication, a vulnerability. You should have taken a daughter from the John or the Kim family. This experiment will cost you." Chioma had been listening intently. The months in Seoul before her escape hadn't been wasted. She'd studied Korean relentlessly, a tool for survival. She understood every venomous word. A calm, icy fury settled over her. She set her porcelain spoon down on the table with a deliberate clink. The sound was small but definitive in the silent room. Both men looked at her. She lifted her eyes to meet Elder Park's shocked gaze. In clear, carefully enunciated Korean, her voice steady as stone, she said, "Elder Park, my child will carry the resilience of the Niger and the discipline of the Han. He or she will inherit the strength of two continents that have survived far greater trials than boardroom politics. That is not a delusion." She paused, allowing her words to hang. "That is a power you, in your small world, cannot even begin to comprehend." The silence that followed was absolute. The elderly man's mouth opened slightly, his eyes wide with disbelief and then boiling rage. He turned to Min-jun, expecting his son to chastise this insolent woman. Min-jun had not moved. He was staring at Chioma, his chopsticks frozen in his hand. A storm of emotions warred in his eyes. Shock, fury at his father's insult, and something else. Something blazing and fierce. Slowly, deliberately, he placed his chopsticks down. A slow, dangerous smile, the first genuine, uncalculated one she had ever seen directed at her, touched his lips. He turned to his seething father. "It seems a Bianim," Min-jun said, his voice deceptively light, "that my wife is full of surprises. And she is correct. The future is not built on purity of the past, but on strength of the new. My child will be that strength." He raised his glass slightly towards Chioma, a silent, shocking toast. The battle lines in the Park family had just been redrawn, and Chioma had fired the first defiant shot. After a dinner that concluded in frigid silence, Min-jun followed Chioma back to her room, not to her sitting area, but right to the door of her bedroom. He stopped her with a hand on her arm. His touch was electric. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I have ever witnessed," he said, his voice low. "My father is now your enemy. But you have made something else clear tonight." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You are not just a vessel. You are a queen who does not know her own throne. From now on you will stand beside me, not behind me. Starting tomorrow, we have an appearance to make." He came to her room later, not as a husband, but as a general briefing an ally. He poured 2 glasses of water, a strangely domestic gesture in the tense atmosphere. "You defended our child," he began, handing her a glass. "You understood the insult was not just to you, but to my authority, to the legitimacy of my line." "He insulted me," Chioma corrected, holding the cool glass. "My family, my blood. And by doing so, he disrespected your choice. Your judgment." He studied her, a new respect glinting in his eyes. "My father is a known adversary. I have newer, more dangerous ones. A rival consortium, led by a man named Day, is making aggressive moves on my international shipping lanes. There will be consequences. A response will be necessary." A familiar fear, cold and slick, coiled in Chioma's stomach. "What does that mean for us?" Her hand went to her belly. "It means," he said, closing the distance between them, his gaze intense, "the fragile truce is over. From this moment forward, we are a united front. To the world, to my father, to men like Day. We are inseparable, unbreakable. You will be by my side, and you will wear the armor of the Park name as if it were your own skin. Do you understand the commitment?" This was no longer the crude ultimatum of a jailer. It was the stark proposition of a partner in a dangerous game. Her survival and their child's now hinged on performance. Chioma met his gaze, the fire from dinner still burning within her. "I understand the game, Min-jun. But understand this, I am not just playing a part. If I stand beside you, I do it for my child's future. Our child's future. Not for your empire." A flicker of something, acknowledgement, maybe even approval, crossed his face. "Good," he said, the word a low rumble. "Then we begin tomorrow." He turned to leave, then glanced back, his eyes traveling from her face to the curve of her hip in the hanbok. "Wear something that reminds them you are Nigerian royalty as well as a Park. Let them see the power you spoke of." The next evening, as she stood before a mirror in a stunning modern gown that blended a traditional Nigerian geli headwrap style with Korean minimalist lines, a maid brought a velvet box. Inside was a necklace, a breathtaking piece featuring a single flawless black pearl set amidst fierce-looking diamonds. The note card bore a single handwritten character in sharp strokes. Dragon. It was not a gift. It was a brand. And as she fastened it around her neck, she felt its weight, both literal and symbolic. She was walking into the lion's den, not as prey, but as the lioness. The car awaited. The event was a charity gala at the National Museum of Modern Art, a sea of Seoul's most powerful and beautiful people. When Min-jun handed her out of the car, his hand didn't leave the small of her back. It was a constant warm pressure, a claim staked before 1,000 watching eyes. Whispers followed them like a wake. The runaway bride is back. Pregnant. How dramatic. The dragon has reclaimed his treasure. Min-jun navigated the crowds with a predator's grace, introducing her simply, firmly. My wife Chioma. No explanations, no apologies. One particularly sleek businessman, a known associate of the rival day, approached with a smarmy smile. Parkasai. And the beautiful Mrs. Park. I hear you've been abroad, acquiring new assets. His eyes dipped to her necklace, then her stomach, with vulgar appreciation. Min-jun's hand on her back tightened imperceptibly, his thumb stroking a slow, possessive arc on her spine. The simple touch, meant as a display for the vulture before them, sent a jolt of pure lightning through Chioma's body. It was protective, territorial, and intensely intimate. My only asset of value stands beside me, choice Sai, Min-jun replied, his voice icy. Everything else is just business. Excuse us. He guided her away, his hand remaining firmly in place. In the relative quiet of a balcony overlooking the museum's sculpture garden, the noise of the gala muted to a hum. Chioma took a shaky breath. Does it ever stop? The posturing. The threats. He looked down at her, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. No, he said simply. It only changes shape. His gaze dropped to her lips, then flickered away. For a moment, the mask of the dragon was gone, and she saw the exhaustion of constant vigilance, the loneliness of the throne. The car ride home was thick with unspoken tension. They sat in silence, the glow of streetlights washing over them in rhythmic waves. Then he moved. Not to take her hand, but to gently, so gently, tuck a stray twist of her braid behind her ear. His knuckles grazed the sensitive skin of her cheek. They both froze. The air in the luxurious car became charged, unbearably thin. Chioma's heart hammered against her ribs. His touch was nothing like the possessive display at the gala. This was hesitant, almost tender. He pulled his hand back as if scorched, clenching it into a fist on his knee. That, he said, his voice rough and strained, was for the cameras on the balcony. They are always watching. But his eyes, wide and slightly startled in the passing headlights of another car, told a devastating, undeniable truth. Had nothing to do with cameras. Back at the Hannock, he walked her to her door. He didn't leave immediately. He stood there, a formidable silhouette against the soft hallway light, wrestling with something unsaid. Chioma, he began, then stopped. He shook his head, a rare gesture of uncertainty. Sleep. Tomorrow. Tomorrow we plan for the future. A real one. He turned and walked away, leaving her more confused, more unsettled, and more painfully aware of him than ever before. The planning involved securing a future free from direct threats. Min-jun, taking her safety with a new, grim seriousness, insisted on upgrading her security detail even for mundane trips. A few days later, she went with a trusted guard, Tae-soo, to an upscale district known for its boutique baby stores. For a few precious minutes, looking at tiny, soft clothes, she allowed herself to dream of a normal life. It was a mistake. As they left the store, a black van without plates screeched to a halt, blocking the narrow street. Men, Not the usual rough enforcers, but disciplined, efficient operatives, poured out. Tae-soo reacted instantly, shoving Chioma behind him and reaching for his weapon. A brief, brutal struggle ensued. Tae-soo was good, but he was outnumbered 4-1. A sickening blow to his head with the butt of a gun sent him crumpling to the pavement. Before Chioma could scream, a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. A sickly sweet chemical smell filled her nostrils. Chloroform. Her last thought as the world tunneled into blackness was a silent, desperate cry to her baby. "Sorry. I'm so sorry." She awoke to concrete, cold and gritty against her cheek. The air smelled of damp rust and oil. Warehouse. Panic surged, but she forced it down, her hands immediately cradling her belly. The baby moved. A weak sob of relief escaped her. "Ah, she's awake." The voice was smooth, educated, and utterly cold. A man stepped into her line of sight. He was in his 50s, with a lean face and eyes like a snake. Day. Mrs. Park. Or should I say, the dragon's delicate weakness. "Welcome. What do you want?" Chioma managed, pushing herself up to sit, her back against a cold steel pillar. "Leverage," Day said simply. "Your husband is being unreasonable about certain maritime routes. I think the prospect of never meeting his heir will make him more amenable to negotiation." He smiled, a chilling sight. "Or perhaps just the sight of you, a little worse for wear, will do. A man in emotional distress makes poor business decisions." He nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward, a cruel-looking knife in his hand. Day raised his own hand, not to strike her, but to trace a line in the air near her face. Such a unique beauty. It would be a shame to mar it. Chioma didn't flinch. She looked him dead in the eye, the fury of a mother lion blazing within her. "If you touch me," she said, her voice low and steady, "he won't negotiate. He will burn your entire world to the ground and salt the earth. You have no idea what you've just unleashed." Day's smile faltered for a second, unsettled by her defiance. He raised his hand higher, this time to signal a blow. The blow never landed. With a deafening, shattering crash, the main warehouse doors exploded inward, torn from their hinges by the force of 2 roaring black SUVs. In the haze of dust and splintered wood, a single figure emerged from the lead vehicle. Park Min-jun. He wasn't wearing a coat. His white dress shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, and in his hand was not a gun, but a simple heavy steel pipe wrench. His face was a mask of pure, apocalyptic wrath. He had not come to negotiate. He had come to wage war. What followed was a brutal ballet of violence. Min-jun moved with a terrifying, focused efficiency. He wasn't fighting, he was dismantling. The wrench in his hand became an extension of his rage, cracking bones, disabling men with precise, shocking blows. His men fanned out, dealing with the perimeter, but the center was all him. He was a force of nature, a typhoon in the confines of the warehouse, and his eye was locked on one target, Day. Day, panicking, yanked Chioma up, the knife now at her throat. "Stop, Park, or I open her up right here." Min-jun froze. The wrench hung at his side, dripping. His chest heaved, but his eyes were calm, dead calm. The calm of absolute zero. "You have a knife at the throat of the only thing in this world I give a damn about," Min-jun said. His voice so quiet it was more terrifying than a scream. "You have 3 seconds to move it before I separate your head from your shoulders. You'll never make it." Day screeched, the blade pressing enough to draw a bead of blood. 1. Chioma closed her eyes, not in fear, but in a strange, transcendent focus on her child. 2. Day's arm trembled. It was his undoing. In the space between 2 and 3, Min-jun moved. The wrench flew through the air, not at Day's head, but at the arm holding the knife. A sickening crunch echoed. Day screamed, his arm bending at a grotesque angle, the knife clattering to the floor. In 2 strides Min-jun was there. He caught Chioma as she stumbled, pulling her behind him with one arm, and with the other, delivered a single brutal fist to Day's face. The man dropped like a sack. Then, and only then, did the dragon turn his attention to his treasure. He dropped to his knees before her, his bloodied, wrench-calloused hands coming up to cup her face with impossible gentleness. He scanned her frantically, his eyes wild with a fear she'd never seen. "Did they hurt you? The baby? Is the baby?" "We're okay," she choked out, the tears finally coming. "We're okay. You came." The words shattered him. The invincible dragon broke. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in the crook of her neck, his body shaking. Not from exertion but from sheer, desperate relief. "I'm sorry," he gasped into her skin, his voice ragged. "I'm so sorry I failed you. I swore to protect you and I failed." He repeated it like a prayer, like a curse against himself. He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her to his SUV, never letting go. In the back seat, he held her cradled against his chest, his chin resting on her head, whispering words in Korean she didn't fully understand but felt in her soul, words of apology, of possession, of a vow being rewritten. As the vehicles sped away from the warehouse of horrors, his phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again, insistently. With a growl, he fished it from his pocket. The message on the screen was not text. It was a photograph of Chioma's younger sister, Neka, laughing outside the University of Lagos library. The attached text was in English. "A weakness blooms under the Lagos sun. Your reach is long, dragon, but the roots of others are deeper. Renounce the routes. Or watch the flower wilt." Back in the hammock, in the safety of her room, Min-jun refused to let anyone else tend to her. He cleaned the tiny cut on her neck himself, his touch feather-light. He brought her tea, wrapped her in blankets, and sat on the edge of her bed, just watching her breathe, as if to reassure himself she was real. The adrenaline had burned away, leaving behind a raw, vulnerable truth. The silence between them was no longer tense, but charged with something about to be born. "I thought," Min-jun began, his voice hoarse, staring at his own hands, now clean but no less dangerous, "that my fury when you left was because you stole my heir. It was a logical offense, a theft of property, a betrayal of contract." He lifted his eyes to hers, and they were stripped bare, full of a painful honesty. "But in that warehouse, when I saw his hand on you, when I saw the knife at your throat, I realized my rage was not for a stolen heir. It was because you stole yourself. From me." He took a shaky breath. "I was not mourning a missing child, Chioma. I was mourning a missing wife. The silence in that penthouse after you left. It wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. It was empty. You took the color, the sound, the life from it." He reached out, tentatively, and traced the line of her cheekbone with his thumb. "The man you met before the wedding, the one who asked about your dreams of designing buildings. That was the real me. The one buried under a lifetime of duty and survival. The dragon is the armor I built to survive my father's world. And you." A faint, broken smile touched his lips. "You, with your Nigerian sunsets and your stubborn fire, you chipped the armor. And in that warehouse, you shattered it completely." Chioma's heart felt too big for her chest. She reached up, her fingers touching the stubble on his jaw. "Then let it fall away, Min-jun. Let it crack and break. I don't want the dragon. I want the man." A shudder ran through him. He captured her hand, turning it to press a desperate, reverent kiss to her palm. The kiss was a surrender. And then, as if pulled by a force greater than both of them, his lips found hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a conflagration. It was months of anger, fear, longing, and unspeakable passion exploding at once. It was an apology and a claiming, a vow and a plea. It was the end of the war between them and the terrifying, glorious beginning of something new. When they finally broke apart, breathless, foreheads resting together, the world had reordered itself. He looked into her eyes, his own blazing with a possessive, tender fire. "You are mine," he breathed. "And I am yours. Until my last breath." He kissed her again, slower now, deeper, his hands framing her face. But as the kiss deepened, promising so much more, the cruel world intruded again. His phone, forgotten on the floor, buzzed once more with a new, urgent alert. The threat to Lagos wasn't just a message. It was moving, and the man who was now fully, irrevocably in love had to become the dragon one more time, not to cage her, but to protect everything she held dear. The interrupted kiss left a vacuum, filled instantly with the grim reality of the threat. But the energy between them had fundamentally changed. There was no more client and prisoner, no wary adversaries. There was only a united front, forged in fear and sealed with a kiss. Later that night, after security briefings and frantic calls to his contacts in Nigeria, the tension in the hammock was a live wire. The danger to her family was a shared agony. Min-jun came to her room not to strategize, but because he couldn't stay away. The door clicked shut behind him. No words were needed. The look that passed between them was a wildfire. All the suppressed passion, the fear of loss, the desperate relief of finding each other in the rubble of their broken arrangement, ignited. He crossed the room in 3 strides. His hands came up to cradle her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks, his eyes searching hers. "Tell me to leave," he whispered, his voice thick with a barely restrained need. "Tell me this isn't what you want." Chioma didn't speak. She rose on her toes and answered him with another searing kiss. It was all the permission he needed, and the last thread of his control snapped. Clothes were not lovingly removed. They were obstacles torn away in a frantic mutual need to feel skin, to confirm life, to erase the memory of the knife and the cold warehouse floor. He laid her back on the bed, his powerful body covering hers, a welcome, anchoring weight. In the dim light, she could see the raw emotion in his eyes, a terrifying mix of desire, tenderness, and a lingering, feral protectiveness. He entered her in one slow, profound stroke, joining them completely. A gasp tore from her lips, not of pain, but of overwhelming sensation, of a connection that went deeper than the physical. He stilled, buried inside her, his forehead dropping to hers, his breath ragged. "You will hate me for this," he breathed against her lips, each word a confession. "Hate me for the danger my world brought to your door. Hate me for the gilded cage I made for you. Hate me for the fear I saw in your eyes in that rain." He began to move, a slow, rolling rhythm that stole her breath. "Hate me for every second of loneliness I caused you." His pace increased, each thrust punctuating his litany. "Hate me when I'm inside you, Chioma," he groaned, his voice breaking with the intensity of his feeling. "Hate me with every fiber of your being." She could only clutch at his back, her nails digging in, her hips meeting his with equal fervor. "I don't hate you," she managed to gasp, the words torn from her soul. "I never could." His rhythm became frantic, desperate. "Then love me," he pleaded, a vulnerable, broken command. "Love me because you are mine." "No. God help me. I have been yours from the moment you looked at me in that wedding hall and didn't bow your head." His release crashed over him with a raw cry of her name, and she followed him over the edge, a wave of blinding pleasure that felt like both a homecoming and a rebirth. Afterwards, wrapped in each other, slick with sweat and tears, the world ceased to exist. He held her so tightly she could barely breathe, his lips against her hair, murmuring words in Korean and broken English. Promises, apologies, vows. In that chaotic, passionate union there was no hate. There was only forgiveness, a desperate, soul-deep connection, and the terrifying, beautiful acknowledgement of a love that had grown in the most barren of soils. As dawn's first light painted the room gray, they lay intertwined, a tangle of limbs and shared breath. Min-jun's phone, silent for a few blessed hours, lit up on the nightstand. He tried to ignore it, pulling her closer. But it was a video call request from an unknown Nigerian number. With a deep sense of foreboding, he reached for it. Accepting the call, the screen filled not with a threat, but with a scene of chaos. The courtyard of her family's compound in Lagos. Smoke. Running figures. And the distant sound of shouting. The camera panned, and for a second they saw her father. His face etched with panic, being hustled indoors by unfamiliar men. The call dropped. The threat was no longer a message. It was live. And it was happening now. The sanctuary of the night was utterly demolished. Min-jun was out of bed in an instant, pulling on pants, his face the cold, calculating mask of the dragon once more. But this time the fury behind it was personal, white-hot. "I will deploy my team in Lagos. They will extract your family," he said. His voice clipped, already reaching for a secure satellite phone. "No." Chioma's voice was sharp, clear. She sat up, wrapping the sheet around her, her mind clicking into a gear he'd never seen, the strategic, protective mind of an eldest daughter. "You sending your Korean cavalry into my family's home in the middle of a crisis? That will look like an invasion. It will start a war on their doorstep, with them caught in the crossfire. They are not pieces on your board, Min-jun. They are people, with their own allies, their own protocols." He turned, impatience and fear warring on his face. "What is your solution, then? We cannot sit here." "We go," she said, the idea solidifying as she spoke. "You and me. Together. We go to Lagos. Right now. We show whoever is behind this that I am not a hidden weakness. I am alive, I am well, and I am protected by the most powerful man they could ever imagine crossing. We go not as invaders, but as a united front coming home. We remove the weakness by standing in the open and making it our greatest show of strength." Min-jun stared at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, not just passion now, but the fierce intelligence and courage of a queen defending her kingdom. He was no longer looking at the woman he needed to protect, but the partner he needed beside him. A slow, proud and fierce smile spread across his face, transforming his features. "We go to Nigeria," he declared, his decision final. "Pack what you need for a tropical climate and for a diplomatic entrance." He was already barking orders into his phone in rapid Korean, arranging for the jet, for security, for a presence that would be felt, not just seen. The dragon was mobilizing, but for the first time, he was following his queen's lead. 12 hours later, as the private jet began its descent into Murtala Muhammad International Airport, Lagos glowing like a spilled jewel box below, Min-jun looked at Chioma, now dressed in a powerful modern Nigerian designer dress. "Remember," he said, taking her hand, "we are not here to ask for peace. We are here to impose it." The plane touched down, not at the commercial terminal, but at a private hangar where a small fleet of dark SUVs awaited, flanked by a mix of Min-jun's severe Korean detail and several formidable-looking Nigerian men in crisp suits. Her father's own security, now coordinating with his. The fusion of their worlds had begun on the tarmac. The wall of humid, fragrant air that hit them as they exited the plane was a physical force. To Min-jun, used to Seoul's ordered seasons, it was an assault of sensations. The rich, earthy scent of rain on hot asphalt, the distant rhythmic pulse of Afrobeats, the vibrant, chaotic symphony of a city of 20 million souls. Chioma inhaled deeply, a transformation coming over her. Her posture relaxed. A light returned to her eyes that even their newfound intimacy in Seoul hadn't sparked. She was home. Her family's compound in Ikeja was a universe away from the serene Hanok. It was a vibrant bustle of color, laughter, loud arguments, and overwhelming tactile love. News of their arrival had preceded them, and they were swarmed. Aunties in gorgeous Ankara wraps pulled Chioma into crushing hugs, weeping and praising God for her safe return, their hands immediately going to her belly with blessings. Uncles shook Min-jun's hand with a firm, assessing grip, speaking rapid English and Yoruba he couldn't follow, their eyes missing nothing. Min-jun, the Dragon of Seoul, was utterly disarmed. He was fed jollof rice and suya until he thought he might burst, challenged to a game of drafts, which he lost spectacularly to her little brother, and had his attempt at a Yoruba greeting met with uproarious, affectionate laughter. He watched Chioma, radiant, laughing freely, switching between English, Yoruba, and Igbo with effortless grace, and he finally understood. This was what she had fought for. This warmth, this noisy, messy, living love. This was the son she'd been stolen from. Her father, a tall, proud man with graying temples and intelligent eyes, finally pulled Min-jun aside into a quieter study. The man's bearing was that of a former soldier, which explained the efficient security. "You hurt my daughter when she left," Mr. Nwachukwu said without preamble, his voice low and grave. "I see the shadow of it in her eyes, even now. But I also see something else when she looks at you. Something new. Something strong." He fixed Min-jun with a stare that had made lesser men buckle. "Know this, Okomi. In this place we protect our own. That light in her eyes. If you let it die again, you will not answer to a Korean conglomerate or a rival gang. You will answer to me." It was a threat, but not from a position of weakness. It was from the unshakable foundation of family. Min-jun, for the first time in his life, felt no urge to dominate or counter-threaten. He felt only respect. He gave a deep, formal bow, not the slight nod of a superior, but the bow of a man to his elder and equal. "I will spend my life, sir," Min-jun said, meeting the man's gaze squarely, "making sure that light not only never dies but burns brighter than the sun. You have my vow." It was the truest promise he had ever made. As night fell, the compound settled into a contented hum. Min-jun stood on a balcony, watching the fireflies dance in the mango trees. Chioma joined him, leaning into his side. For a moment peace reigned. Then his Nigerian head of security, a man named Chaik, approached, his expression grim. "Sir Ma, we have identified the source of the earlier disturbance. It was a small, hired group trying to infiltrate, to take a hostage for leverage. They were discouraged. But the one who hired them was not a local thug. His money trail leads back to a shell corporation. The signatory authority on the account is a Korean name, Ju Dae. The rival had followed them. The battlefield had simply shifted continents. Dae, it seemed, was unwilling to concede. Using intermediaries, he had hired local trouble to continue the pressure, believing the unfamiliar terrain would cripple Min-jun's effectiveness. He was wrong. The confrontation was set, not in a shadowy warehouse, but in the blazing afternoon sun at the popular Kuramo Beach waterfront. Dae's intermediary, a flashy local fixer with pretensions of grandeur, arrived with a contingent of rough-looking men, expecting to intimidate. Min-jun arrived with Chioma. But they were not alone. Behind them was a seamless phalanx of his Korean detail and Chaik's Nigerian team, a silent, impressive display of merged strength. Chioma, in a stunning iro and buba that looked like battle regalia, stood tall. The fixer blustered. "This is not your country, Oyinbo. You cannot bring your wars here." Min-jun didn't even speak. He simply looked at the man, a cold, dismissive stare that made the fixer's bravado wilt. It was Chioma who stepped forward, her voice carrying over the crash of the Atlantic waves. "You think you can threaten me here?" she called out, her tone dripping with disdain. "On my soil. In front of my people." She nodded to Chaik. From the crowd of vendors and beachgoers, a dozen other men materialized, not in suits but in casual clothes. They were her father's men, and men who owed favors to her uncles. They were mechanics, market leaders, and local figures of respect. They surrounded Dae's hired hands with a quiet, implacable presence. The fixer's men looked around, suddenly realizing they were not just outnumbered, but out of their depth. Min-jun finally spoke. "Tell your employer, Ju Dae," he said, his arm sliding possessively, naturally, around Chioma's waist, "that the dragon's treasure is not a weakness. She is the source of his power. She is protected by the strength of Seoul and the heart of Lagos. If he ever looks in her direction again, I will not bring him a war. I will bring him an extinction so complete, they will forget his name." The fixer, outmaneuvered and humiliated, backed away, his men melting into the crowd. Tension broke. As the local men nodded respectfully to Chioma and dispersed, she turned to Min-jun, the setting sun framing her in a golden halo. A smile of triumph and relief started to form on her lips. Then it vanished, replaced by a sharp gasp. Her hands flew to her stomach. A wave of pressure, intense and unmistakable, washed over her. Her knees buckled. Min-jun caught her instantly, his face draining of all color. Chioma. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with realization, pain and dawning joy. The baby, she whispered. She's coming. Now. Panic, pure and unvarnished, seized the dragon. In the middle of a Lagos beach, having just faced down a threat, he was now confronted with the one thing he couldn't control, couldn't intimidate, and couldn't live without. The car. Now, he roared, sweeping her into his arms as his perfectly orchestrated security detail dissolved into a frantic, beautiful scramble to get the queen to safety. The birth of Adeolisa Park was a whirlwind that perfectly encapsulated her parents' union. It happened in the best private hospital in Lagos, in a suite that soon became a crossroads of two cultures. Min-jun, who had faced down armed men without flinching, was a pale, trembling wreck. He refused to leave Chioma's side, his hand crushed in hers, murmuring a mix of Korean encouragements and broken English pleas. Her mother and aunties were there, singing traditional Yoruba songs of strength, rubbing her back, creating a cocoon of feminine energy and ancient wisdom. A stern, efficient Korean Dr. Min-jun had flown and stood beside the excellent Nigerian obstetrician, the two professionals communicating in a blend of medical jargon and gestures. Through the storm of pain, Chioma clung to Min-jun's voice, to the familiar scent of him as her anchor. And when their daughter's fierce, indignant cry finally split the air, a sound of pure, powerful life, the world stopped and then began anew on a different axis. With tears streaming down his face, Min-jun cut the cord with hands that shook. When the tiny, perfect girl, with her mother's rich complexion, a faint dusting of her father's straight black hair, and eyes that already seemed to hold a knowing calm, was placed on Chioma's chest, he broke completely. He sobbed, kissing Chioma's sweaty forehead, then his daughter's, whispering, my Anhi, I'm sorry for everything. Thank you. Her name, Chioma whispered, exhausted but radiant, her finger stroking the baby's cheek, is Adeolisa. Min-jun looked at her, the question in his watery eyes. It is Igbo, she explained softly, her own voice thick with emotion. It means the daughter of God. She is not just an heir. She is not just a peace treaty. She is our blessing, a fresh start, our living proof that from fire and fear, something beautiful can grow. He repeated the name, Adeolisa, tasting the syllables, feeling their meaning seep into his soul. Adeolisa, he vowed, his voice firm now, looking from his daughter to his wife. She will know only love and strength, and the power of both her names. Weeks later, back in Seoul, the hanok was transformed. The serene silence was now punctuated by the demanding cries of a newborn, the vibrant sounds of Afropop and highlife music, and the rich aroma of Nigerian stews from the kitchen. Min-jun's empire was undergoing its own rebirth, shedding its shadowy edges, fortifying itself with legitimate global strength, a fortress not just for business but for his family. He and Chioma were partners in every sense. They debated business strategy, planned Adeolisa's future, and in the quiet of their shared room, explored a love that grew deeper, more passionate, and more real with each passing day. The story that began with a threat in the rain ended not with a conquest, but with a family, a dynasty built not on fear, but on forgiveness fused in fire, and bound by a love that was as unbreakable as it was unexpected. And so, the dragon found his heart not in a vault of gold, but in the fierce love of a runaway bride, and the runaway bride found her home not in escape, but in the arms of the man she was destined to transform. Their legacy, little Adeolisa, sleeps soundly, a symbol of two worlds united. But tell me, dear viewers, is the story ever truly over? Could the shadow of Elder Park, humiliated and bitter, stretch out to threaten their hard-won peace from within the family itself? Or perhaps a figure from Chioma's past in Lagos, an old flame or a jealous rival, could arrive in Seoul with a hidden agenda, seeing her new life as a prize to be tarnished. The world of power, passion, and protection never rests. The next chapter for the Park family is already being written. If you must know whether their love can shield their daughter from the storms of the past, you know what you have to do. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Don't miss a single moment of the drama, the passion, and the powerful resolution. Because when the next threat emerges, you need to be right here, on the front lines, witnessing if a love forged in fire can withstand anything. Subscribe now.